Did you know that some US states are running on Canadian electricity? Yes, you heard that right. Canada has been quietly keeping the lights on in parts of the US for years. But here's the twist. As the US ramps up economic pressure with steep tariffs, Canada is hitting back. And now with tensions rising, Canada might just flip the switch. Literally. If that happens, entire regions in the US could face major power shortages and the economic fallout would be massive. So, how did we get here? And what exactly is Canada planning? Let's break it all down, but first, we need to understand how this trade war started. One evening in late 2024, during a private dinner at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump, then president-elect, threw out a suggestion that caught everyone off guard. Turning to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he said something along the lines of, Canada would do a lot better as America's 51st state. The room went quiet for a moment before nervous laughter rippled through the guests. Most assumed he was joking. After all, it was a pretty outrageous idea. But Trump, in his signature style, kept going. He claimed that under US rule, Canadians would pay less in taxes and have access to a far superior healthcare system. At the time, Trudeau gave a polite smile, likely brushing it off as dinner table banter. But Trump? He wasn't done talking about it. A few days later, on December 10th, 2024, Trump fired off a post on Truth Social, referring to Trudeau not as the Prime Minister of Canada, but as Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. That one post was all it took to send the internet into a frenzy. Was he serious? Was this just another classic Trumpism? The reactions were a mix of amusement, outrage, and sheer confusion. Then, things escalated. On December 18th, Trump made another bold claim, saying that many Canadians were in favor of the idea. He didn't provide any evidence, but that didn't stop his supporters from running with it. Memes flooded social media, news outlets scrambled to cover the story, and suddenly, what had started as an offhand comment at dinner had turned into a full-blown political moment. By early January 2025, Trump decided to turn up the pressure. He announced that unless Canada tightened its border security, the US would slap a hefty 25% tariff on all Canadian imports. His reasoning? We're subsidizing Canada for almost $300 billion. Why are we doing that? If we're going to pay for them, they might as well be part of us. It was a clear message. If Canada didn't start playing by his rules, he was going to make things difficult. On January 7th, 2025, Trudeau finally responded, and he did not hold back. With a smirk, he told reporters, "There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever become part of the United States." His firm rejection didn't seem to faze Trump. In fact, it only fueled him more. On Christmas Day, December 25th, 2024, he posted another message on Truth Social, claiming that if Canada joined the US, taxes would drop by 60%, businesses would double overnight, and Canada would gain massive military protection. Then came another move. On January 7th, 2025, Trump held a press conference where he clarified that military action was off the table, but economic force, that was fair game. He argued that a US-Canada merger would make both countries safer and even save America money on border security. Then, to top it all off, he posted a photoshopped image of a US flag stretched across both America and Canada with a caption referencing the Canadian national anthem. The message was clear. Trump wasn't just throwing out ideas, he wanted this to happen. On February 1st, 2025, Trump officially announced a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, with an effective date of February 4th. Canadian officials were furious. Trudeau and his team wasted no time crafting a response. While the US president was busy making bold claims online, Canada was quietly preparing a strategy to fight back. Then on February 2nd, Trump took to Truth Social once again, reaffirming his position. He insisted that Canada should embrace its destiny as the cherished 51st state, and promised that if they agreed, tariffs would vanish and military security would be guaranteed. But Canada had no intention of giving in. Instead, they were about to hit back with their own plan. In response to President Trump's move to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods, the Canadian government announced its own set of tariffs, targeting $155 billion worth of American imports. This included a hefty $30 billion in direct trade penalties. But just as tensions seemed ready to boil over, a temporary truce was reached. After a direct conversation between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and President Trump, both sides agreed to hit the brakes, for 30 days at least. This pause would allow further negotiations, but Canada made it clear. If U.S. tariffs kicked back in after the pause, Ottawa was fully prepared to launch its own economic counterstrike. Canada wasn't putting all its eggs in the tariff basket. Officials were already looking at other ways to apply pressure. One option? Restricting American access to key Canadian exports, like critical minerals and energy products, both of which the U.S. relies on heavily. Another strategy involved cutting off American companies from bidding on Canadian government contracts. But perhaps the boldest move was Canada's shift in focus toward Asia. Instead of depending on the U.S. as its primary buyer of oil and gas, Canada was expanding its exports to countries like China and Japan. The timing couldn't have been better. In May 2024, the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline was finally completed, nearly tripling its capacity to 890,000 barrels per day. With this new infrastructure in place, Canada could now ship more oil directly to the Pacific coast, giving energy-hungry Asian nations a chance to step in where the U.S. had once dominated. Alberta, the heart of Canada's energy industry, wasted no time in capitalizing on this new reality. In February 2025, Alberta's Environment Minister, Rebecca Schultz, flew to Tokyo for high-level discussions on liquefied natural gas, LNG, exports. She met with Japanese officials and representatives from major energy companies like JERA and JOGMEC, pitching Canadian LNG as a stable and geopolitically secure energy source. The selling points were hard to ignore. Compared to other global suppliers, Canada offered shorter shipping times and a more reliable supply chain. Major refiners in Japan and South Korea, including ENEOS and GS Caltex, had already started receiving Canadian crude shipments back in September 2024. Now, Canada was looking to cement long-term energy partnerships in the region. It wasn't just the oil industry that was being restructured. Canada's provinces were also getting involved in the economic fight. Ontario Premier Doug Ford signaled that his province might cut off electricity exports to U.S. states like Minnesota, Michigan, and New York if the tariffs weren't lifted. This was no small threat. About 1.5 million Americans relied on that power supply. If Canada followed through, those states could be in for a serious energy crisis. Beyond that, Canada was rethinking its overall trade relationships. Instead of relying so much on the US, the country was working to strengthen its economic ties with Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. Trade agreements like the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, with the European Union, and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, gave Canada new pathways to expand its exports beyond North America. As the trade war escalated, something unexpected happened. A wave of national pride swept across Canada. Social media buzzed with hashtags urging Canadians to buy local and support homegrown businesses. From grocery stores to clothing brands, people were making a conscious effort to shift away from American products. Even the government took note. Trudeau's administration began looking at ways to break down internal trade barriers between provinces, something that had long been a challenge. By making it easier for businesses to sell across Canada, the country could build a stronger domestic market, making it less vulnerable to economic pressure from the U.S. Behind closed doors, Trudeau was increasingly worried about something bigger than just trade disputes. In a private meeting with Canadian business and labor leaders in Toronto, he raised a troubling possibility. What if Trump's ultimate goal wasn't just economic leverage, but something more? He pointed out that Trump had repeatedly made comments about Canada being better off as part of the United States. At first, those remarks were brushed off as jokes, but now Trudeau wasn't so sure. Mr. Trump has it in mind that the easiest way to do it is absorbing our country, and it is a real thing, he warned. According to Trudeau, the US wasn't just interested in trade. They had their eyes on Canada's vast natural resources. Oil, minerals, fresh water, things the US would benefit from if Canada were somehow brought under its control. This realization made Canada's next steps even more urgent. Strengthening trade ties with other countries, boosting domestic production, and reinforcing economic independence weren't just about surviving a tariff battle. They were about protecting Canada's future. For years, the United States has leaned heavily on Canada for key resources: oil, natural gas, metals, and more. But lately, something has changed. President Donald Trump's offhand comments about Canada becoming part of the US were originally brushed off as jokes, but now people are starting to wonder, could there be more to it? It's not just about diplomacy, it's about resources, big ones. Canada is sitting on a goldmine of natural wealth that the US depends on, and that reliance is deeper than most people realize. Let's break it down. If there's one thing tying the US and Canada together, it's oil. Canada is the fourth largest oil producer in the world, pumping out around 4.6 million barrels every single day. And guess where almost all of it goes? That's right, straight to the United States. Over 97% of Canada's oil exports are sent south, where American refineries process and distribute it across the country. In other words, without Canadian oil, the US energy system would be in serious trouble. Most of this oil comes from Alberta, home to the massive oil sands that have turned Canada into a global energy powerhouse. Alberta alone accounts for 87% of Canada's oil exports, with additional production coming from Saskatchewan and offshore fields in Newfoundland and Labrador. The US divides its oil imports into regions called Petroleum Administration for Defense Districts, PADs, and Canada plays a major role in every single one. Midwest, PAD 2. 61.8% of Canadian oil goes here. This region relies on Canada the most. Gulf Coast, PADD 3, 18.6%, a crucial area for refining and distribution. West Coast, PADE 5, 7.2%. Canadian oil is key for California and beyond. Rocky Mountain, PADD 4, 6.8%, keeps the central US running. East Coast, PADD under 1, 2.6%, small but still important. In total, Canada's oil trade with the US is worth a staggering $124 billion annually, making it one of the biggest drivers of the Canadian economy. The infrastructure connecting the two countries, pipelines like Keystone, Enbridge Mainline, and Trans Mountain, ensures a steady flow of crude, keeping prices stable and refineries running smoothly. If anything were to disrupt that flow, it wouldn't just be a problem for Canada. It would be a crisis for the US. Oil gets most of the attention, but natural gas is another major factor in the US-Canada energy equation. Canada is the fifth largest natural gas producer in the world, pumping out 17.9 billion cubic feet per day in 2023. And just like with oil, a huge chunk of that gas, about 7.9 billion cubic feet per day, gets shipped directly to the United States. That makes Canada a critical supplier, helping to heat American homes and power industries across the country. Most of this natural gas comes from Alberta and British Columbia, with Alberta alone producing 121 billion cubic meters annually. These provinces have vast reserves, particularly in shale formations that are key to meeting future demand. In total, natural gas exports brought Canada $13 billion in revenue in 2023, proving once again that energy isn't just a trade asset, it's the backbone of the Canadian economy. With tensions rising over trade and tariffs, some Canadian officials have started questioning just how much longer this partnership can remain one-sided. Nickel isn't as famous as oil or gas, but it's just as important, especially as the world shifts toward electric vehicles. Canada is the sixth largest nickel producer in the world, producing 158,668 tons in 2023. The country's rich nickel deposits are spread across Ontario, Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Manitoba, with Ontario leading the pack at 39% of total production. But here's where things get interesting. Nearly half of Canada's nickel exports go directly to the US. Other key buyers include China, Japan, and the Netherlands, but America remains the biggest customer. Why does this matter? Because nickel is essential for making stainless steel and lithium-ion batteries, the kind used in electric cars and renewable energy storage. With the global push toward greener technology, nickel demand is skyrocketing. While Indonesia dominates the market with 51% of global production, Canada remains a key supplier for the West. And as tensions grow between the US and China, securing a stable, friendly nickel source could be a major reason why Washington is paying extra attention to its northern neighbor. When you think of aluminum, you probably picture soda cans and airplanes. But this lightweight metal is also a crucial material for industries ranging from construction to defense. And Canada? It's a global heavyweight in aluminum production, ranking 4th in the world with 3 million metric tons produced in 2022. This industry alone brings in $14.2 billion in export revenue, and the US is once again the biggest buyer. Given how deeply embedded aluminum is in manufacturing and infrastructure, securing a steady supply is critical for the American economy. At first glance, Trump's remarks about annexing Canada might seem like just another one of his off-the-cuff comments. But when you dig into the numbers, a pattern starts to emerge. Canada isn't just an ally, it's a lifeline for the United States, supplying critical resources that keep the country running. Oil? Canada provides the majority of US imports. Natural gas? Essential for American homes and industries. Nickel? Crucial for electric vehicles and batteries. Aluminum? Key to manufacturing, defense, and construction. If Canada ever decided to shift its trade focus to other countries, say China or Japan, it could send shockwaves through the US economy. That's why Canada's recent push to diversify its exports has Washington paying close attention. And if tensions continue to rise, the US may find itself needing Canada far more than Canada needs the US. Canada isn't just a country with stunning landscapes and polite people, it's a goldmine of natural resources that the world depends on. From oil and uranium to hydroelectric power and precious metals, Canada supplies the US and many other nations with the raw materials they need to keep their economies running. But how valuable are these resources, and why do so many countries, including the United States, rely on them so heavily? Let's take a deep dive into what makes Canada an economic powerhouse. Aluminum is one of Canada's biggest exports, and business is booming. In 2024, the country's aluminum industry was worth $16.5 billion, with revenue growing at a steady 2.3% per year over the past 5 years. What's driving this growth? Rising global demand, increasing exports, and one huge advantage: Canada's aluminum is produced using renewable energy. Unlike many other countries that rely on coal or fossil fuels to make aluminum, Canada's production is powered mostly by hydroelectricity, making it cleaner and more environmentally friendly. That's a big deal, especially as industries worldwide push for lower carbon emissions. It's also why countries like the United States, $13 billion in imports, Mexico, $363 million, and India, $79 million, rely on Canadian aluminum. Zinc might not grab headlines, but it plays a huge role in modern life. Canada is one of the top producers of this essential metal, which is primarily used to protect steel from rust. That means it's found in everything from skyscrapers and bridges to cars and ships. In 2022, Canada mined 250,000 metric tons of zinc, with most of it coming from Manitoba and Quebec. Even though production dipped slightly from the previous year, zinc exports still brought in $1.25 billion in revenue in 2023. Where does it go? South Korea, Switzerland, Australia, and the United States are some of the biggest buyers, all depending on Canada to supply this crucial material for their construction and manufacturing industries. When it comes to gold, Canada is a major player, ranking 5th in the world in production. In 2022, Canada mined 205.8 tons of gold, which accounted for 5% of total global output. Gold is valuable not just for jewelry, but also for investment and industrial purposes, making it a key resource in the financial and tech industries. And Canada's gold doesn't stay home. It gets shipped worldwide. In 2022, gold exports hit $14.7 billion, making Canada the 7th largest exporter of gold globally. The United Kingdom, Switzerland, the US, Hong Kong, and Singapore were among the top buyers, proving that Canadian gold is in high demand. If there's one resource that makes Canada a strategic energy powerhouse, it's uranium. This radioactive metal is essential for nuclear energy, and Canada happens to sit on some of the highest grade uranium deposits in the world. Most of Canada's uranium comes from the Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan, a region known for its incredibly rich deposits. Unlike many other uranium sources, these mines produce ore with concentrations far higher than the global average, making them some of the most valuable in the world. In 2022, Canada produced 7,451 tons of uranium, supplying 15% of the world's uranium demand, making it the second largest producer globally. That was a big jump from the previous year's 4,693 tons, reflecting a major recovery in production. And where does all this uranium go? Canada exported nearly 12,000 tons in 2022, bringing in $1.38 billion in revenue. The biggest customers included the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Germany, and the United States, all of which depend on Canadian uranium to fuel their nuclear power plants. Looking ahead, Canada is set to double its uranium production by 2035 as more countries turn to nuclear power as a cleaner energy alternative. When it comes to clean energy, few countries do it better than Canada. Hydroelectric power is the dominant source of electricity in the country, making up 61.7% of total energy production. In 2022, Canada generated nearly 394,000 gigawatt hours of hydroelectricity, making it the third largest producer of hydropower globally, and with an installed capacity of over 82,000 megawatts across 595 hydro plants, Canada is a true renewable energy leader. Which provinces lead the charge? Quebec, 41,000 megawatts. British Columbia, 16,000 megawatts. Newfoundland and Labrador, 8,000 megawatts. Ontario, 9,000 megawatts. Manitoba, 6,000 megawatts. But Canada doesn't just produce hydroelectricity for itself, it exports huge amounts of clean energy to the US. In 2022 alone, Canada supplied over 50 terawatt hours of electricity to American markets, generating a record high $5.8 billion in revenue. Key US states like New York, New England, and the Midwest rely on this power to keep their grids stable, and with energy demand rising, Canada's hydro industry is only becoming more valuable. Canada's resource wealth isn't just impressive, it's essential to the global economy. Whether it's fueling industries with aluminum and zinc, driving financial markets with gold, powering homes with uranium, or keeping the lights on with hydroelectricity, Canada's role in the world is undeniable. But with these riches comes dependence. The United States, Europe, and Asia all need a steady flow of Canadian resources to keep their economies running. That makes Canada not just a trade partner, but a global economic force that few can afford to ignore. Canada is home to some of the most valuable natural resources on the planet, making it a key player in global trade. From diamonds and potash to vast forests and hydroelectric power, the country supplies essential materials that fuel industries around the world. But as economic tensions rise, Canada is rethinking its trade strategies and reinforcing its independence. Across Canada, hydroelectric plants generate a massive amount of clean energy, powering homes and businesses while also supplying electricity to the US. Some of the biggest facilities, like the Robert Bourassa Generating Station in Quebec and the Churchill Falls Station in Newfoundland and Labrador, are engineering marvels that produce enough power to sustain entire regions. Hydropower isn't just Canada's largest source of electricity, it's also a major export. In 2022 alone, Canada sold over 50 terawatt hours of electricity to the US, bringing in $5.8 billion in revenue. Provinces like Quebec, British Columbia, and Manitoba are leading this energy trade, ensuring a steady flow of power to American cities. With its commitment to renewable energy, Canada is proving that sustainability can be profitable, and that its resources are indispensable to global markets. While most people associate diamonds with Africa or Russia, Canada has quietly become one of the top diamond producers in the world. Mines in the Northwest Territories, including Ekati, Diavik, and Gahcho Kué, extract millions of carats each year, supplying high-quality gemstones to international markets. In 2019, Canadian mines produced 18.6 million carats of rough diamonds, valued at $2.25 billion. Although production dipped slightly to 16.2 million carats in 2023, Canada still exported $1.7 billion worth of diamonds that year. One of the reasons Canada's diamonds are highly sought after is their traceability. Each stone is laser etched with a unique mark, often a maple leaf or polar bear, proving its ethical origin. This commitment to transparency has made Canadian diamonds a top choice for buyers who want to avoid conflict stones. Major markets like Belgium, India, and the US continue to rely on Canada for their diamond supply, reinforcing the country's position as a leader in the global jewelry industry. Potash might not be as flashy as gold or diamonds, but it's one of the most important resources for global agriculture. This mineral is a key ingredient in fertilizer, helping to grow crops that feed billions of people. And when it comes to potash, no country does it better than Canada. In 2023, Canada produced 13 million metric tons of potash, making it the largest producer in the world. The industry brought in a staggering $16.8 billion in 2022, securing potash's place as the top-ranked commodity by value in Canada. With food security becoming a growing concern worldwide, demand for potash is expected to rise. Canada's dominance in this market gives it an enormous advantage in global trade, especially as countries seek stable sources of agricultural inputs. Canada's boreal forest is one of the largest intact forest ecosystems on Earth, covering 280 million hectares across the country. This vast wilderness is more than just a natural wonder, it's a powerhouse for the $45.6 billion forest industry. From lumber to paper products, Canada is a top global supplier of wood-based materials. In 2022, the US was the biggest buyer, purchasing the majority of Canadian exports. But Canada's forestry industry also supplies key markets in China, the United Kingdom, Japan, and South Korea, proving that its resources are in demand worldwide. While softwood lumber exports fell by 17%, other segments like newsprint, plus 35%, and printing paper, plus 33%, saw major gains, balancing out the industry's growth. In fact, Canada produces 32% of the world's newsprint, making it a dominant force in the market. For decades, Canada's trade relationship with the US has been its economic backbone. In 2023, over 56% of Canada's mineral exports went to its southern neighbor, followed by China, 7%, the UK, 6%, Japan, 4%, and South Korea, 3%. But as trade tensions rise, Canada is looking to diversify its economic partnerships. Increased investment in Asian and European markets is part of a larger strategy to reduce dependence on the US and secure alternative trade routes. This shift isn't just about economics, it's about sovereignty. Some analysts believe that recent US trade policies are an attempt to exert pressure on Canada, possibly even pushing for deeper economic control. However, Canada has made it clear that it won't be strong-armed into any deal that compromises its independence. With new trade alliances forming and economic policy shifting, the next few months could define the future of Canada's global role. Will it forge new partnerships, or will tensions with the US reach a breaking point?